Who will play with Connor Bedard? Chicago Blackhawks. They need some veteran talent. Right now, you look at that roster, and Bedard is probably the best player there already, and he hasn't been drafted yet. So that's a team that needs some help. And from talk, just a lot of people in Chicago are just like, we're not sure what they're going to do, but they kind of have a lot of cap space. They got basically freedom to do whatever, and they got the best bargaining chip in the entire NHL right now. And they're yeah, it's not hard to convince players to go play with Connor McDavid. It wasn't hard to convince people to play with Sidney Crosby. It will definitely not be hard to convince people to play with Connor Bedard. And you're playing for a franchise that has a deep history and a good fan base. So again, interesting. But what do the Blackhawks do here?
Yeah, I think this is another crucial question for fantasy in more ways than one. From Bedard's perspective, we've both made it clear on this show that we're very bullish on him for next season. I think we both would take him in roughly the second round. I'm expecting him to be a point per game player at worst as a rookie. I think he's that good. But he does need some people around him because right now I was looking at the projected lines. It's like maybe you played Lucas Reichel on the wing, Andreas Athanasiou, Taylor Radish. Like it's bad. It is bad. The options are absolutely barren right now. And I do think, even though the Blackhawks were obviously in full mega tank mode, I think now that they have Bedard, I don't think they're going to structure their team for another tank job. I think they're willing to move in some pieces now. And like you said, Stephen, is this an attractive market? Even though Chicago, as a franchise, has been villainous in its behavior in the last decade and a half, in terms of just if you're a player and you're going to a team that has a clean slate now, technically, Chicago's a fun city, like you said, great fan base. So it's an appealing place to go. And of course, a team that's building around Bedard. I don't think Chicago's going to have too much trouble attracting players. The other side of the coin is whichever players do go to Chicago, that's intriguing for their fantasy value because if they end up playing with Connor Bedard, it could really spike as well. So if I just think of an example, let's say Chicago signs Ivan Barbashev. Well, he goes to Chicago and he becomes a first line player and he's always with Connor Bedard. His fantasy value goes through the roof. Maybe he has a career year. So got to watch carefully, not just for Bedard's value, but for whoever's going to be playing with him.
The one thing that I was kind of hoping for would have been a chance for Patrick Kane to play with him. And, Patrick Kane's a guy that came in with a lot of attention on him. Obviously, everything, there were some off ice things at the beginning of that career, but, not that I expected from Bedard, but it's like that's a guy who went through everything. He, a highly touted goal scorer. Very highly rated prospect, one of the best players to ever come out of the U.S. national development team. So that was a guy there that could have been a decent mentor for him. Obviously, they traded him away, but maybe the fact that he's probably going to have to take a lesser salary to play next season because of his long-term injury might be kind of interesting to see if they end up getting him back. But it seems like he kind of wrote that off, though. He says he doesn't really want to go to a rebuilding team, and I get it. People will say, "Oh, well, he's won a Stanley Cups," but that was a while ago. In hockey player, like you always want to win. And there's got to be some very certain circumstances to continue wanting to play somewhere that is not going to be competitive. And he's had his chance. He got traded to the Rangers. He knows what it's like to be back on a competitive organization. I don't think he's going to want to just, give everything up. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do because there's not a lot of high-profile free agents this year. They do have a lot of draft picks. If they want to make a trade, they could do something there. And they really got a really nice prospect pool. So I do think the Blackhawks have a solid future compared to teams like Buffalo, Anaheim. I think they're still a little farther away, but they'll get there. And they've got a good group. And Bedard's going to really push things forward.